Today we have a crazy story of revenge against a sister-in-law. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, I reported my roommate for embezzlement. About 2 years back, I secured a job at a massive firm. It wasn't easy to get in. I had to go through 3 months of training where we were faced with an aptitude test, intense interviews, and exams, but I was able to work my way into getting a job with my friend Susan. We met on my first day of training and clicked. We would study together and help each other memorize notes, and before we knew it, we got into the company. We decided to save money and move in together since we worked at the same firm. So we moved into Susan's apartment and I paid half the rent. We also got a car, so it was easier going to work. She worked at the tax and auditing unit while I worked with human resources. During our training, Susan always spoke about how she had a crush on Jeremy from the human resources unit, and it would make her happy if she was posted there, so I brought up the idea of us switching places. I told her so many times, all we had to do was get a form and request to be moved and it would be done. Susan declined the offer, saying it would be unprofessional for her to switch places just to get a guy, and worst of all, if they ended up dating and breaking up, it wouldn't be in her best interest. I understood where she was coming from, and her explanation made a lot of sense, so I just stayed at my department. There was a lot of work in my department, and as a newbie, I was learning how certain things were done, so I closed quite late as opposed to my roommate. They were also quite busy but had a lot more staff in their department, so most of the time she gets home earlier than me. My week was mostly me going to work and coming back to complain to her about the tedious work we did. She always listens to me rant, and after I calm down, she stylishly asks about Jeremy in between the conversations. I found her crush on him adorable and we decided to set them up together. Jeremy and I weren't close, but we worked together and we were cordial with one another. During one of our extended work hours, I asked Jeremy if he had a girlfriend. He told me he had just broken up with a long-term girlfriend and he wasn't looking for anything serious at the moment. I told Susan about how my conversation with Jeremy went, and she was in a fit of rage asking me why I did that. She said, and I quote, "I am very much capable of handling myself without your interference. I thought I was being a good friend doing something nice by asking him that question, and I never mentioned her name, so it wasn't even that big of a deal. But since she asked me to stay out of it, I respected her wishes." About 2 months later, I found out from an outside source that she suspected my roommate and Jeremy were dating. I was surprised. I knew nothing about this and we were roommates. Why did she feel the need to hide something like that from me if we were friends? Did she not trust me? I remembered how defensive she got when I mentioned speaking to Jeremy on her behalf, and that confirmed my suspicions. She didn't trust me. I wasn't the type of person to hold a grudge, so I confronted her about it as soon as we got home. She didn't deny that they were in a relationship, but she explained to me that she didn't want to get herself and him in trouble since our office had a strict policy against coworkers dating. I told her it was nothing serious. It was just some set of rules put in place by the boss to scare coworkers into not dating. I would know since I worked at HR, and she replied saying she couldn't take that chance and didn't want to implicate me as well. I bought the story. It made sense at the time. My roommate didn't want to put me in a compromising position between my work and her personal life. Susan and Jeremy did a good job of hiding their relationship from work, although a few people knew, but they weren't blabbermouths, so it wasn't a viral topic. Most times, Jeremy and I closed around the same time. He would offer me a lift home since he was going to see my roommate. Since my roommate always takes the car home and I was a bad driver to be honest, I didn't think it was a bad idea. Before I knew it, my colleagues at the office began spreading rumors about Jeremy and I dating. We immediately denied it and said it wasn't true, but they thought we were lying. I knew my roommate wasn't too thrilled about the whole news, so I took a step back and stopped accepting car rides from Jeremy and took the bus home. Not too long after the whole rumor incident between Jeremy and I, a VIP client account got hacked under our watch. It was a large amount of money, and this had to do with Susan's department. The firm was under investigation because we all knew it had to have been someone who was working at the office. The cops took more time questioning those at the audit and tax unit because they had access to the account statement of each client's. They nitpicked every single detail regarding each staff. What scared my boss was the fact that if one person could successfully steal that amount of money and didn't get caught, it would be a morale for others to do the same. He made sure he kept track of login info to the firm's computers, but whoever did the job was good, and it was clear it wasn't a one-man's job. Due to the investigation, we were asked not to come to work, so my roommate and I had enough time to ourselves. I noticed she was a bit more hostile than usual, and her boyfriend hardly came around. It was always her going to his place. There was an incident where he came by, but she had gone out to get groceries. We greeted as usual, and he joined me on the couch watching a documentary. We were in the middle of a discussion about the whole office drama when my roommate arrived, and I saw flashes of anger in her eyes. She was so insecure about her relationship, it began to bug me. I kept thinking about putting myself out there, thinking that would make her feel less threatened. A few days later, I went out for coffee with a guy I met on my way back from work. We chatted once or twice, but I wasn't thinking of making it something more. Work was stressful as it was, and there wasn't time. But since we'd been told to take time off till further notice, it wasn't a bad idea to go out and date. After my date ended, I came back home to hear Jeremy and Susan having an argument about something, and Jeremy storming off. She had a very dark look on her face when she saw me at this point. I was tired of her BS, so I minded my business this time around and went straight to my room. I already promised not to interfere in whatever was going on, and if my roommate was going to act different because of a guy, then I sure as heck wasn't going to talk to her about mine. We hardly talked to each other, just the usual greeting in the morning and going about our days separately. The firm went through a massive crash in stock, as people were afraid to invest after what had happened, and a lot of staff were laid off, my roommate included. Their department took a big fall. I was so grateful my roommate never complied to my idea of switching positions. I noticed she didn't seem too down about getting fired. She and Jeremy resolved whatever they were fighting about, and they were fine. Too fine for someone who just got fired. My roommate who had been fired was getting bags with price tags of $25,000 and more extravagant things. I mean, we were getting paid well, but not to that extent. I found it odd, but thought it was a coping mechanism for her. After all, we all had different habits. Before I knew it, it had been a month and she wasn't looking for a job. But since it wasn't none of my business, I stayed out of it. Jeremy asked for some time off from the boss, saying he wanted to have a short vacation with his girlfriend since she had been feeling down after losing her job. My roommate was definitely not feeling down about anything, but it was their lives and they could do whatever they wanted. In an attempt to gain new potential investors, the firm organized a party inviting a lot of businessmen. I was busy preparing for the event when I realized I'd ran out of some hair products. I went into my roommate's room, who was out at the time, and saw she sealed it shut. That was weird, but I had a spare key, so I was able to open it and grab what I wanted. Something caught my attention on her bed, and that was a suitcase filled with clothes. I remembered Jeremy saying something about them going on a vacation, so I didn't think too much, but the suitcases were about 3 sets. That was quite a lot for a vacation. Then my eyes went to a journal by her bedstand. I had never seen this before, so out of curiosity, I began flipping through its pages, and lo and behold, my roommate had a lot of crap to write about me. I knew we weren't in the best terms, but this lady hated my guts. She wrote about how she and Jeremy conspired and got a professional to hack into a business account that caused the firm such a huge loss, and about how she wanted to frame me for it, but Jeremy said no, and how they got into a huge argument about it. Then I remembered the day I saw them arguing after my date and realized that must have been what they were arguing about. She said he was always defending me and I secretly wanted to steal her man. There was really a lot my roommate wrote about to discredit me. I was stunned and heartbroken. I loved her like a sister, so to see her write those awful things about me was just painful. Out of anger, I took her journal and kept it, leaving her room as I met it. At the event, I went to meet my boss and showed him the part where she was responsible for the missing money. My boss was furious. He called the cops and requested a warrant for her arrest. The next day, she and Jeremy were in the middle of packing when the cops came and arrested her. It turned out they were trying to run away using the vacation story as a disguise. My roommate got what she deserved. She was an insecure, manipulative backstabber who was willing to frame me for her bad deed. So yeah, good riddance to her. I heard from a colleague that she was sentenced to 7 years for embezzlement, while her boyfriend 5 years. It served them right. I told my family about the whole ordeal during Thanksgiving, and they were shocked. They knew Susan as my sweet roommate, so to hear she did something so severe was just so shocking. Needless to say, I never rented an apartment with someone again. Well, I know OP said that they're never going to rent an apartment with someone ever again, but I feel pretty confident in saying OP can be rest assured I don't think their next roommate, if they had one, would do something nearly quite this level. Although OP said they were paid well, so they probably are making enough dough to get their own apartment anyways. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is how I got my stepsister to apologize. As an only child, I was very much used to being alone, which was fine by me. Sure, it got boring sometimes, but I had a few friends and I really liked my space, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But then my mom and dad got divorced, and with their divorce came the change of environment. My mom and I were forced to move to a new city to start over. She wanted a fresh start and I had no say in the matter. I was 15 at the time. We settled in nicely, some of the changes got to me, but I was slowly adapting to the new city and my new school wasn't so bad. About 6 months after my mom's divorce, she met someone new. He was also divorced with kids and they hit it off right away. Before I knew what was going on, a year had passed and my mom's new lover proposed to her. This came as a shock to me at the time, but what I wasn't prepared for was the living together arrangements. I knew there were going to be certain changes that might not be in my favor, but my mom was an open-minded person, so she did her best to convince me that everything would be fine, and to be honest, I wanted her to be happy. My dad was a cheat and a manipulative liar. He is my dad, but that didn't change the fact that he was what he was. My mom went through a lot of emotional trauma in her previous marriage with my dad, so to see her happy with someone new was something that I wanted for her. I decided to be a little more open-minded to the idea. It might not be so bad. My mom's new husband Ryan was very nice and easygoing. He was the type of person you could tell anything without feeling nervous or afraid to be judged. Maybe it had to do with his job. He was a consultant at some firm. Ryan and my mom decided it would be best to start living together before their marriage so that it would be easier for us to ease into the arrangement after their marriage. Ryan had 2 girls, one was 12, Betty, and the second was 10, Claire. When I found out I was going to have 2 younger stepsisters, I got excited thinking it might be fun. I would have sisters to do girly things with. Ryan and my mom decided we would move to his house since my mom and I rented an apartment. This was because a house would have been too big and spacious for the both of us, and Ryan's house was actually closer to my school. It was a win for me. A week into living with Ryan, I could tell his younger daughter Claire wasn't too happy with the idea. It was funny because she always acted fine around my mom and her dad, but when we were alone, it was either she was glaring at me or she would randomly leave the room as soon as I got there. Betty, on the other hand, was nonchalant about things. She was always focused on what interests her, like her book or a game or like a TV show. So we hardly talked, but we had no problem with each other. Once, Betty and I engaged in a conversation, and she told me not to take the things Claire does to heart. She was having a hard time because she wanted her dad and mom to get back together, but we came and spoiled her plans. She was the youngest, so she was probably having a hard time with the changes. I did my best to try and get along with her. I had no idea of what 10-year-olds liked then, but I tried to shower her with little cute gifts, like hair ribbons or a cute top I saw on my way back from school. The girl wasn't having it. I found the top I got for her in the trash can and I was hurt. After about 2 months of staying with my new family, I noticed some few differences between my stepsisters. Betty was reserved and gentle. She didn't talk except when she needed to and liked her space. Claire, on the other hand, was very cautious with all her assets and never allows anyone to enter her room. She loved being the center of attention, and if I was being honest, Claire was a bit spoiled. I couldn't blame her. She was mostly with her easygoing dad who gave her what she wanted. Things got worse when a friend of mine came to visit our house for the first time. I was excited to show her around, so we both left our bags on the counter and went to my room. Ryan put in a lot of work arranging my room to make me feel welcomed, and I wanted to show my best friend the new look. We got into talking, and before we knew it, time had gone. My friend had to leave when she noticed her bag straps had been tampered with. It was clear that someone used a scissor to cut into it. All the contents inside her bag were still intact. I knew it was our little queen bee way of saying none of my friends were welcome into her father's house. I apologized to my friend and promised to get her a new bag, explaining the situation to her. She just laughed and said it was fine. She had siblings at home, so she was used to it. As I saw her off, she asked me how I would get back at her. I told my friend I didn't know what to do. She had a wicked grin on her face. and told me she had ideas and we would discuss them the next day. My friend and I began to plot our payback at my stepsister who had gone to visit her mom for the week since Ryan and my mom were busy planning for the wedding. They thought it would be a good idea for his daughters to spend time with their mom, which gave me access to different areas of the house. My friend advised I kept it simple by also cutting the strap of her bag with a scissor. It would send a message to her that I was responsible for it and I couldn't be messed with. I should have known that my little stepsister would lock up her room. She was very cautious with all of her accessories and liked to show off things, so she would want to keep them safe, especially after knowing what she did. But I wasn't giving up. I went to the side of the house and got a ladder to sneak up to her room through her window, which she also sealed shut. It was quite embarrassing when the neighbors passing by saw me and thought I was a thief. I had to explain myself with evidence, which they didn't believe till someone called my stepdad to confirm. I promised myself never to do something so dumb again. Suddenly, it occurred to me to have just asked my stepdad for the spare keys instead of going through so much trouble. Later that night, I asked my stepdad for a spare key needed for my room. He tossed me a bunch of keys and told me to check out the one that fitted my lock. I used the opportunity to sneak into my stepsister's room and did the needful before handing back the key to my stepdad. When Claire came back from her mom's place and saw what I'd done to her bag, she threw a tantrum and cried the whole night, pointing fingers at me. I told her Karma was a witch and she started it first. My mom blamed me for being childish and I told her Claire was a spoiled brat who needed to be put in her place. Needless to say, the night didn't go well. My mom pleaded with me to be the bigger person and apologize to Claire since she was just a child. I told her they were enabling her bad behavior and I wasn't going to do that. I woke up the next morning to see some parts of my hair had been chopped off. I immediately knew who was responsible and reported her to her dad. It was clear my stepdad didn't know what to do. He apologized to me and told me he would talk to her. I wasn't able to go to school that day. Instead, I went to a salon and trimmed my hair into an ugly pixie cut, which didn't look good on me. I never got an apology from Claire. Betty, on the other hand, came to see if I was okay. I was pained because my mom's wedding was only a week away and this was the horrible hair that was going to be seen in all the pictures. I knew Claire would go crazy if I messed with her hair. She had lots of hair clips and ribbons and took pride in her blonde hair, so I decided to let it go. I was able to get by on Mom's wedding by using a shawl. It wasn't the most comfortable experience, but I got by. I was very careful not to let my hair show in most of the pictures. As karma would have it, a week after my parents' wedding, Claire had a sudden breakdown and was taken to the hospital. It turned out she had chicken pox. She was so scared by the rashes on her skin and the idea of it leaving scars on her skin. Everyone tried to console her, but little Miss Perfect wasn't having it. My mom and my stepdad went to get some of her few favorite things to cheer her up, and Betty was busy with a game on her tablet at the reception, so I was left alone with her. I told her the pox was a curse placed on people who are mean to others for no reason, and the only way to undo the curse was for her to apologize to me and others she hurt, and she would be free. I also told her it was a secret between us both, and she shouldn't tell a single soul or else her sickness would worsen. I had never in my life seen my stepsister so gentle. She apologized to me for chopping off my hair. She apologized to my mom, confessing to her that she initially hated her when she first came into their lives. She apologized to her dad for some mean things she did. Everyone was so shocked at her behavior, asking her what came over her. She said nothing. She just wanted to apologize in case anything happened to her. They kept telling her she would get better, while she kept asking for forgiveness. I couldn't hold my laughter and had to leave the room so no one would catch on as to what was going on. In the end, Claire was just a gullible young girl. My stepsister was so nice to me even after she left the hospital. She had little spots on her skin and she kept asking if it would leave if she was nicer to those around. My God, it was hilarious. She also apologized to my friend when she came over the next time. Now she's grown up quite a bit and we have a younger brother we all adore. She later found out I lied to her when she told her classmate who had the same illness what I said, and the whole class made fun of her. She didn't take it easy with me, but it was still nice to get her to apologize at the time. Am I wrong in saying what OP did here is actually like textbook older sibling behavior. You tell some far-fetched, way out there lie to get your siblings to start acting better to you, and then later on down the road, you let them find out on their own and you have that fun, huge laugh when they come back to you angry that you totally lied to them. It's like telling your younger sibling the story of pillow pants. If anybody actually gets that reference, you're a real one. That said, our next story is, my sisters-in-law didn't like me. At one point in my life, I had managed to get out of a toxic relationship that didn't only threaten my peace, but also threatened my life. I think that situation was one of the most draining experiences I've ever had in my life. I had just managed to walk out of all of that when I met a tall, brown-skinned guy. Let's call him F. I had never thought any man could make me break the vow I had not to get involved with any other guy for a long while. It was a much-needed break for me until F came along. Although we didn't hop on each other's backs immediately, I knew he was someone I wanted to risk it all for. That morning, I walked into one of the local mini-marts in the neighborhood. It was summer, so the sun was up and shiny. I was in a hurry to grab some bites as well as a few groceries before making it to a girls' beach hangout. In that state of frenzy, I barged into the stranger at the market. It was a lot because we both ended up scattering our things on the floor. I was startled and apologetic. I tried to get down as quickly as I could before I invited more stares at us. I was picking up both his things and mine when I heard a gentle voice beside me. I was shocked at how gentle the voice sounded, and I couldn't help but raise my face to put a face to that voice. I can't say it was love at first sight, but I was sure something struck my heart. While we were both trying to pick up our things, he asked me to leave them to him. He went ahead and apologized for that awkward moment. I was surprised because it was me who ought to be apologetic. He helped me take my things to my car, and he asked me if he could make up for the embarrassing moment we both had in the grocery store. I didn't know if I was ready to have a date with a random Mr. Nice Guy I met in a grocery store, but I ended up smiling and giving out my mobile phone number. I eventually made it to the beach to hang out, but I was a bit behind schedule. Half of the time, I smiled and chuckled at the experience I had with F back in the mall. I wondered if he was even a real person because there was something about his aura that made me blush. I didn't like that I felt that way though. I didn't want to go back to that lovey-dovey me who liked to love too much. You know, during my last relationship, some of my friends began to avoid me because they felt I could not date intelligently. I didn't even know what that meant, but the closest meaning to that was how I tolerated so much from my ex in a way you can consider unhealthy. My major excuse for sticking around him regardless of all that he did was because I loved him. Looking back now, what I thought was love for him was simply a lack of love and value for myself. How on earth did I make excuses for someone who was an unrepentant cheat and a narcissist? He could do the unspeakable and still make me feel that I made him do it. I didn't know why I stayed in such a relationship for 2 years, but I was glad that I saw the light when I did. Thereafter, I made a conscious effort to heal and ensure that I was wholesome before anything else again. It was more like a me before anything else kind of mindset. When F and I started going out, the major problem I had was allowing myself to love freely, like he deserved to be loved. Initially, it was difficult for me to agree to his proposal because I was scared of another failed attempt. Even though my therapist had told me I was fit to love another person, I still held myself back due to fear. F, however, refused to give up on me. And good enough, I found myself yielding to his request. We began what I will call a beautiful love story. There were days I got so emotional that I would wonder how lucky I was to have bagged such an amazing man as F. He was the reason why I believed that God was truly a loving father. I remember a few months into our relationship and how I got involved in a ghastly accident. Thank goodness I survived. But I can't seem to forget the role F played in ensuring that I got the best care in the world. He stuck with me like glue. He took weeks off his job when I needed someone to stand by my side. I remember staring at him deeply while I wondered if he was even a real person. Well, life isn't a bed of roses, and I wasn't surprised to see that we also had our issues. It started when I got introduced to his family. Initially, I noticed the cold reception I got from his sisters, who are his only siblings, but I chose not to dwell so much on that. I don't know how to describe them, but I knew they didn't like how their brother adored me so much. Why would they feel threatened? If anything, they should be glad that their brother found love with an amazing woman. When I could no longer keep it to myself, I confided in F. I had to tell him everything I had noticed just to be sure that I wasn't imagining things. I was surprised when he told me to focus on us instead of his sisters. He said I was getting married to him, not them. Except, of course, if their validation meant more to me than his love, even though I had mixed feelings, I knew what he said was right. We went ahead to get married and I couldn't be happier. I was also thankful for my parents-in-law who showered me with love and care. So to me, it was a win-win, and I felt that was all that truly mattered. Soon enough, all my fears of an unstable home due to constant interference from my sisters-in-law began to manifest. I hated it so much that F wasn't seeing how uncomfortable they made me feel. No matter what I said, his response would be for me to focus on him and us, because that's all that matters. I felt that he behaved that way because his siblings and he were raised with so much love and togetherness. He had told me that the three of them were so inseparable while growing up. They were always in one another's space, and they even had to concede to a relationship or friendship before either of them could go out with such a person. He told me once that his sister didn't like the girl he was going after, and they made it clear that they would not concede to that relationship simply because they felt the girl was proud. When I asked him if he listened to them, I was shocked to hear him say, "I had no choice." That statement made me step aside from our relationship for a while because I couldn't deal with the fact that he allowed his sisters, who are younger than him, to have so much say in who he dates. It took a lot of reassurance and affirmation for me to believe that he wouldn't walk out on us one day just because his sisters didn't approve of our relationship. So I knew what I was getting into before I agreed to marry F. I believed a part of me was determined to fight no matter what. I was given the option of leaving a good man behind so his sisters could continue to tell who he could or could not date, or fighting for a love that was whole, rare, and beautiful. Well, I chose the latter and everything else that came with that choice. I became a sworn enemy to his sisters because they felt I was the one who was trying to tear their bond apart. So they deployed various tactics just to make my relationship with F as uncomfortable as possible. They would come into our house unannounced just because they felt they could. I remember a time when F and I went vacationing, and I was surprised to arrive home to one of the sisters. I mean, she was well positioned in our home, and I could tell that she'd been there for days. I was shocked to realize that F had given them a spare key to our home, which indicated that they could come anytime they wanted to. That was one of the few times that I had a verbal altercation with my husband. I was so livid that he could do such a thing without my knowledge, and all that he could say was, "They made me do it." At that point, it became glaring to me that if I needed to stay married to F, I had to deal with him first before dealing with his sisters. He was the one who wanted a wife, and he had to show the world that that was the decision he made. There and then, I made it clear to him that such a thing would never happen in our home, and I demanded that his sister leave immediately. Thankfully, she didn't argue. His sisters weren't happy that he had disapproved of some relationships that ought to have been great, so they wouldn't want to see him happy either. It was more like they were sacrificing their happiness just to please another member of the family. As much as I've seen lots of toxicities, I have never seen anything of the sort before. Now, I was left with a feeling of guilt because I was the girl who refused to leave. Everything went south when I came into the picture. As much as I wanted to feel bad, I was quick to shut that feeling off. To me, whatever it was they were practicing was wrong, and as far as I was concerned, they all deserved to choose whoever they wanted without any feeling of guilt. The most anyone could do was give a word of advice or sound counsel when needed. As much as I was determined to stand for what was right, his sisters were also determined to ruin whatever I felt I had with F. One last time, they tried to destroy my marriage with F by trying to link him up with a girl from his past. It was a well-calculated plan that, to them, was intended to hurt me badly. They planned to get F and this lady on the same bed so that they could send me pictures. When F showed up at their house, they didn't expect to see me behind him. When the girl saw that F was married and even came with me, his wife, she became angry. Because the girl hadn't been around, she didn't know what was happening. She couldn't understand why they had wanted her to meet her ex, who had moved on with someone else. She was so hurt that she stormed out of their apartment. After that awkward moment, I stared deeply at my husband's sisters. It was more like I was staring into their soul. When I did, all I saw was defeat and pain. F and I have been together for 5 years, and we have 2 wonderful kids together. The best revenge was choosing to stick to a course I believe in, irrespective of who conceded or not. Well, thankfully, it sounds like by the end of the story, they're understanding they need not give in to the demands of their sisters and, live life for themselves and be happy with their partner that they wanted and they chose themselves. Best of luck to OP and their partner though, because I doubt these sister-in-laws, who seem to have no real life of their own and they just seem attached at the hip to their family, they probably won't give up, they'll probably be back. This is like a Count Olaf situation. They're gonna just keep on trying to give you a series of unfortunate events. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.